The point I want to make is that there's three arguments about the impact of private label. One of them is, does it reduce the returns to processors and producers? That's one argument. But I think an equally important argument is that private label kills category growth, category value growth, and brands drive category growth. So basically, when private label come in, what they do is they work by stealing market share. They don't grow the market. They fight for the market share. But what you need to do to grow the market is to have innovation and branding and marketing. And so it's the competitive tension that actually has grown the category. So if you use the milk example, Australia is one of the few countries in the world that's stopped the decline in per capita consumption of milk. But what they've done is they've grown the value of it. So we're drinking about the same litrage of milk, but it's at a higher value, and it's because of the competitive tension in the market. So what happens is that you get innovation in the market, so you're getting people, bringing in their easy to digest, extra cream, low fat, added vitamins, added fibre, whatever. And it's that competitive tension and product variety that's bringing consumers to the fold. They're paying more for it because it's offering them a value proposition, and it's driving the category growth. And the thing about it is that I've got a handful of things here. There's 92 milks available at the moment. So all of that competitive tension has driven the category growth. And if you take that category growth out, then if you take the drivers of that out, then the category starts to falter. So what I'm saying is that at least a healthy proprietary brand needs a margin, an extra premium of 10% to be sustainable. They need, and without that, they can't really invest in the future, which drives the category growth. So they need at least 5% to fund innovation, to come up with a new idea, and they need at least 5% to tell people about the new idea. So it works like this. Brands generate a premium margin. The premium margin funds innovation. The innovation provides a unique selling proposition, low fat, high fat, whatever. And then the marketing drives it. And so the whole thing's a virtuous circle. And so if we break that circle, if we don't have that innovation, we don't have the marketing support, we don't have that brand competitive tension, the whole thing starts to slow down. What's happened in the Northern Hemisphere is we're getting specialists who do nothing else but private labs. So they set up factories at a low cost in regional areas, and they can compete and make money out of it. But the problem is our food industry is geared up to make money out of proprietary brands with private label as a sideline, but increasingly private label is becoming a bigger part of the business. So we really have to look at that. But I think we've got the signs that the thing's turning around. I think the balance of power is shifting. I mean, as I said before, the supermarkets have immense market power, no doubt about that. But I think the early signs that things are starting to shift. And this issue with the Queensland floods, etc., is starting to bring that home a bit earlier for perishable goods such as vegetables. But, so supermarkets could find a situation where certain things are hard to get. Processors aren't generating the profits needed to fund ongoing investment. So the average earnings before interest and tax on a food processing company in Australia is 7%, and their cost of capital is about 12%. So you do your own maths. Not generating enough to pay for the capital, to pay for the investment for the future. And also they're not investing in the cost savings. So they're not investing, most companies invest $1 million or $2 million a year to get to drive some costs out, to get robotics and get lower cost things. They can't afford to do that, so they're under a lot of pressure. So most of these guys are really at the point where they're not making money, and it's not sustainable in the longer term. So just to finish up, I don't know exactly where the private label thing's going to go, but I think almost certainly we're going to see a lot more of it. The consumers are probably better off for it. The agriculture sector is probably not going to fare that well. But I think my sort of view of the prognosis of the future is this. I think we'll see a growing rationalisation in the farming sector. So a lot of small farming and processing businesses aren't sustainable, and they'll go out of business. And particularly in irrigated areas where there's a water buyback, you'll see the dairy farmers selling their water, and because the dairy farmers sell their water, there's no milk, and so the dairy factory can't be supported, and so that will go out of business. We'll see more large, efficient corporate farms and corporatisation of family farms. Seeing large family farms, highly efficient model, scalability, technology, etc. We'll see a lot more of that. I think commodity prices will go up. I think that the basic fundamental of life is that the population that we need to feed is growing rapidly. The resource base, including the land and the water, is declining because of urban sprawl and other uses. The productivity rate, as we saw this morning, is not even keeping up with inflation and certainly not keeping up with demand. So it stands to reason, although that agriculture is always going to be cyclical, I think it's going to be cyclical on a growing curve. So, and I think we're going to get, food's going to become more and more expensive, and that's going to be reflected in supermarket prices, and that in turn is going to be impacted on the way supermarkets run their business. I think supermarkets will have to reinvent their supply chains to lock in a lot longer. And I think the same with food processors. So what I'm telling my food processing clients is that you need to lock in your ingredients. If you make pasta, you need to lock in your durum wheat years ahead. You've got to do that, otherwise you might find A, it's not available, and B, it's very expensive. And the other thing too is that I think we'll see a lot more in the way of food imports. So I think with the strong dollar, it's inevitable. And again, this morning we saw the dollar predicted to be in the 90 to $1.05 range. At that point, it's much cheaper to bring stuff in than grow it here. We certainly won't see importation of highly perishable foods, but it is economic to bring in broccoli even, and probably even milk from New Zealand or whatever. So I think we'll see a lot more imports. I think my sort of attitude though, and I guess this is where I'm a little bit different to the rest, the farmers' response and the farming community's response to this is go along and complain to the government about level playing field and all that. The politics of this is such that politics get elected by consumers, and if consumers can save $1 on a litre of milk, they're pretty happy. They're not that interested in farmers. They see farmers as whinging people with bad hats and straw in their mouths, so they're not that interested. So what you have to do is you have to respond to this, and you can make money out of this, but you have to respond. You have to get bigger, more efficient. You have to develop business models where you can make money. You have to look at pursuing other channels to market, because there's plenty of them. There's plenty of other ways to market. You don't have to go and get your head kicked in by Coles or Woolworths. There's people make a lot of money that don't deal with them. So I think it's very much about innovation. I think it's about creative thinking, and it's about really conditioning yourself to the realism of globalisation, because we live in a global world, and there's nothing that any government can do to stop that. Thank you very much.